beginning of the legend. More than 2,000 years ago, in the ancient world of philosophers and storytellers, a mysterious tale was recorded. It was not written by a sailor, nor by a king, nor by a warrior. It was written by a thinker, a man who spent his life asking questions about truth, justice, and the nature of reality. His name was Plato. In two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato described a powerful island civilization called Atlantis. According to his writings, this island existed far beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which today we understand as the Strait of Gibraltar. Beyond that narrow gateway between the Mediterranean Sea and the vast Atlantic Ocean, there was said to be a great land. Plato described Atlantis as larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. It was a rich and fertile land filled with forests, mountains, rivers, and a vast central plain. The island had an advanced society. Its people were skilled engineers and architects. They built massive temples, complex canals, harbors, and circular cities designed with careful precision. At the center of Atlantis stood a magnificent capital city. The city was built in rings. Concentric circles of land and water surrounded the central palace. Bridges connected each ring. Ships could sail directly into the heart of the city through carefully designed waterways. The walls were covered in shining metals. One of these metals was described as orichalcum, a mysterious substance said to glow like fire. The society of Atlantis was powerful but organized. According to Plato, the island was divided into 10 regions, each ruled by a king. These kings were descendants of Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, who was said to have fallen in love with a mortal woman on the island. Their children became the first rulers of Atlantis. For many generations, the people of Atlantis were noble and wise. They valued law, order, and balance. Their civilization flourished. They traded with distant lands. They built a strong navy. They were wealthy beyond imagination. But Plato's story did not end with peace and prosperity. As time passed, the people of Atlantis became greedy. Their hearts changed. They began to crave power beyond their island. They looked toward other lands and desired control. Their virtue weakened. Their moral strength faded. According to Plato, Atlantis attempted to conquer parts of Europe and Africa. Only one small region resisted them successfully. That region was ancient Athens. Plato described a heroic and ideal version of Athens that stood bravely against the invading Atlantean forces. In his story, Athens defeated Atlantis in battle. Then came the most dramatic moment of all. Plato wrote that in a single day and night of terrible misfortune, earthquakes and floods struck the island. The ground shook violently. The sea rose. The mighty civilization that once ruled the ocean disappeared beneath the waves. Atlantis sank into the sea and was lost forever. That is the original story. But here is the question that has fascinated historians, scientists, and dreamers for centuries. Was Plato describing a real place, or was he creating a moral story? Some scholars believe that Atlantis was never meant to be taken literally. They argue that Plato used the story as a philosophical lesson. Atlantis represented a powerful society corrupted by greed and pride. Its destruction was a warning, a lesson about the dangers of moral decline. Others believe something very different. They believe Plato may have been inspired by real historical events. Around 1600 BCE, a massive volcanic eruption occurred on the island of Thera, known today as Santorini. This eruption was one of the most powerful in recorded history. It devastated the Minoan civilization in the Aegean Sea. Entire cities were buried under ash. Tsunamis struck nearby coasts. Could this disaster have inspired the legend of a lost island swallowed by the sea? There are also those who search far beyond the Mediterranean. Some have suggested that Atlantis may lie in the Atlantic Ocean, perhaps near the Azores. Others have proposed locations in Spain, Antarctica, or even the Caribbean. However, no physical evidence of a massive, advanced island civilization matching Plato's description has ever been discovered. Still, the mystery refuses to fade. Why does this story continue to capture our imagination? Perhaps it is because Atlantis represents something deeply human. The idea that a great civilization could rise to extraordinary heights and then vanish completely. The thought that beneath the waves, hidden in darkness, there may be ruins of a forgotten world. Throughout history, many real cities have been lost and rediscovered. Troy was once thought to be only a myth from Homer's poems. Yet, in the 19th century, archaeologists uncovered its ruins in modern-day Turkey. Ancient cities in Egypt, India, and Central America were buried under sand and jungle for centuries before being found again. So when people hear about Atlantis, they wonder if it might also be waiting to be discovered. In modern times, advanced technology such as sonar mapping and deep-sea exploration has allowed scientists to study the ocean floor more closely than ever before. Vast underwater mountain ranges, trenches, and volcanic formations have been mapped. Yet, no clear evidence of a sunken supercivilization has appeared. Skeptics argue that the ocean floor near the Atlantic is too old and too well studied to hide a large, lost continent. Plate tectonics explains how continents move slowly over millions of years. A massive island sinking suddenly into deep ocean water is not supported by modern geology. And yet, hope remains in the minds of believers. Some researchers suggest that Atlantis may not have been an entire continent, but rather a coastal city destroyed by rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age. Around 12,000 years ago, melting glaciers caused sea levels to rise dramatically. Many coastal settlements from prehistoric times would now lie underwater. If Atlantis was a smaller advanced society located near a coastline, its remains could be buried beneath layers of sediment and water. As we begin this journey into the mystery of Atlantis, we must separate 3 layers of the story. First, the original account written by Plato. Second, the historical and geological possibilities that may connect to real events. Third, the myths, exaggerations, and modern inventions added over centuries. In this series, we will slowly explore each of these layers. We will examine Plato's texts carefully. We will look at the historical context of ancient Greece. We will study natural disasters that may have inspired the legend. We will analyze the scientific arguments for and against the existence of Atlantis, and we will do it calmly, step by step, like drifting across a quiet ocean at night. For now, remember this: the only ancient source that describes Atlantis in detail is Plato himself. No Egyptian record clearly mentions it. No Greek historian outside of Plato confirms it. This makes Atlantis unique. It exists in a space between history and philosophy. Was it a warning story about human arrogance? Was it a memory of a real disaster passed down through generations? Or was it something in between, a blend of truth and imagination? In the next part, we will dive deeper into Plato's world. We will explore why he wrote about Atlantis, what message he may have intended, and how the political situation in ancient Athens might have shaped the story. Before we search the oceans, before we imagine lost temples beneath the waves, we must return to the mind of the man who first wrote about Atlantis. His name was Plato. He lived in ancient Greece during the 4th century BCE. He was a student of Socrates and later became the teacher of Aristotle. His influence shaped Western philosophy for more than 2,000 years. Plato was not a historian in the modern sense. He was not trying to record events exactly as they happened. He was a philosopher. He used stories, conversations, and imagined scenarios to explore deep questions about justice, power, morality, and the ideal state. The story of Atlantis appears in 2 of his works, Timaeus and Critias. These were not simple historical documents. They were dialogues. In these dialogues, characters speak to each other, sharing ideas and arguments. In the story, Plato does not say he invented Atlantis. Instead, he claims the story came from older sources. According to him, the story was told to the Athenian lawgiver Solon when he visited Egypt centuries earlier. Egyptian priests supposedly shared the tale of a powerful island that existed long before their time. But here we must pause. There is no Egyptian record that clearly confirms this story. No temple inscription. No preserved scroll. The only source we have is Plato himself. This raises an important question. Was Plato reporting a real ancient tradition? Or was he creating a powerful philosophical myth? To understand this, we need to understand the world Plato lived in. Ancient Athens had once been powerful. It led alliances, built great monuments, and became a center of culture and learning. But during Plato's lifetime, Athens had experienced defeat in the Peloponnesian War against Sparta. Political instability followed. Corruption, shifting governments, and moral decline troubled the city. Plato deeply cared about the idea of a just and balanced society. In another of his famous works, The Republic, he described an ideal state ruled by philosopher kings. He believed that wisdom, not greed or ambition, should guide leaders. Now think carefully. In the story of Atlantis, we see a powerful civilization that begins noble and wise, but slowly becomes corrupt. As greed and desire for conquest grow, the society loses its moral foundation. Eventually, disaster strikes and the entire civilization collapses. This pattern matches Plato's philosophical beliefs. Many scholars believe Atlantis was meant as a warning, a symbolic story showing what happens when a powerful society loses its virtue. Atlantis represents pride and corruption. Ancient Athens, in Plato's story, represents moral strength and disciplined leadership. It may not have been about geography at all. It may have been about ethics. Plato also lived in a time when storytelling was a respected way of teaching. Myths were not considered lies. They were vehicles for truth. Philosophers often created allegories to communicate complex ideas in memorable ways. For example, in The Republic, Plato describes the allegory of the cave. In that story, prisoners are chained inside a cave, seeing only shadows on a wall. When one escapes and sees the real world, he understands how limited his previous reality was. This story was not meant to be taken literally. It was a metaphor about knowledge and enlightenment. Atlantis may function in a similar way. The structure of the story itself feels symbolic. The island is divided into perfect circles. The kings are descendants of a god. The society begins ideal and ends corrupted. The destruction happens in a single dramatic moment. This reads like moral storytelling, not careful historical record. But there is another layer. Plato places the story of Atlantis 9,000 years before his time. That would mean Atlantis existed around 9600 BCE. This date is extremely early. At that time, according to modern archaeology, humans were mostly hunter-gatherers. Large, advanced cities did not yet exist. Why would Plato choose such a distant date? Some scholars think the number may have been symbolic or exaggerated. Others argue that ancient Egyptian calendars were misunderstood or mistranslated in the story. If the numbers were misinterpreted, the timeline might shift closer to known ancient civilizations. Still, no strong evidence has emerged. It is also important to notice that Plato never finished the story. The dialogue Critias ends suddenly, mid-sentence. We never get the full detailed account of the war between Atlantis and Athens. It simply stops. Some believe Plato intended to continue the narrative, but never completed it. Others think the unfinished nature suggests the story was secondary to the philosophical discussion surrounding it. Over the centuries, readers began to interpret Atlantis in new ways. In ancient times, most writers treated it as fiction or allegory. But during the Renaissance, interest in lost knowledge and ancient wisdom grew. Explorers were discovering new lands across the Atlantic Ocean. Suddenly, the idea of a lost island beyond the known world seemed less impossible. Later, in the 19th century, a man named Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book claiming Atlantis was a real historical continent that influenced civilizations in Egypt and the Americas. His ideas became very popular, even though archaeologists did not support them. From that moment on, Atlantis transformed from a philosophical myth into a global obsession. But we must return to the quiet voice of Plato. If we read his words carefully, we see that his main concern was not treasure or advanced technology. He focused on character, on virtue, on the relationship between power and morality. Atlantis was powerful, yes. It was wealthy. It had great engineering. But these qualities did not save it. According to Plato, what destroyed Atlantis was not simply an earthquake. It was moral decay. The gods decided to punish Atlantis because its people had become corrupt. Their divine blood had faded. Their human weakness had grown stronger. This is a powerful message. Even the most advanced society can fall if it loses its ethical foundation. As we drift deeper into this mystery, we must hold two possibilities in our minds at once. Atlantis could be entirely symbolic, a philosophical warning wrapped in dramatic storytelling, or it could be a myth built upon fragments of real memory, a distant echo of some forgotten disaster. In the next part, we will leave Plato's world and travel into geology. We will examine natural disasters in the ancient Mediterranean. We will explore volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and rising seas. Could a real catastrophic event have inspired the legend of a city swallowed by the ocean? Now we leave the world of philosophy and enter the world of nature. If Atlantis was not purely imagination, then something real must have inspired the story. And in the ancient Mediterranean, nature was powerful, violent, and unpredictable. One of the strongest candidates connected to the Atlantis legend is the volcanic island of Santorini, known in ancient times as Thera. Santorini sits in the Aegean Sea, north of Crete. Today it is a beautiful crescent-shaped island with white houses and blue domes. But thousands of years ago, it was the center of one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions in human history. Around 1600 BCE, the volcano of Thera exploded. The eruption was enormous. Ash shot high into the sky. The explosion shattered the island. Huge sections collapsed into the sea, forming a giant crater called a caldera. Tsunamis spread across the Mediterranean, crashing into nearby islands and coastlines. Entire settlements were buried under ash. Archaeologists have discovered an ancient city on Santorini called Akrotiri. The buildings were multi-story. The walls were decorated with colorful frescoes. The people had advanced plumbing systems and organized streets. It was a sophisticated society. This civilization was part of the Minoan culture, centered on the island of Crete. The Minoans were skilled sailors and traders. They built large palaces, such as Knossos, and dominated sea trade in the region. When Thera erupted, the explosion likely caused massive destruction to Minoan ports and fleets. While the civilization did not vanish immediately, it was severely weakened. Not long after, the Minoans declined and were eventually replaced by the Mycenaeans. Now imagine this disaster from the perspective of ancient people. The ground shakes violently. The sky turns dark. The sea pulls back and then crashes forward in giant waves. Fire and ash rain from above. An island collapses into the ocean. To those who witnessed it, it must have felt like the wrath of the gods. Over generations, stories of this event could have been passed down. Details may have changed, The location might have shifted. The timeline might have expanded. But the memory of a powerful island destroyed by natural disaster could survive in legend. Some researchers suggest that Plato may have heard a distant echo of this catastrophe. However, there are challenges with this theory. First, Plato placed Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which refers to the Strait of Gibraltar. Santorini is inside the Mediterranean, far from the Atlantic Ocean. Second, Plato described Atlantis as a massive island larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. Santorini is small. Third, Plato dated Atlantis to around 9600 BCE, much earlier than the Thera eruption. Because of these differences, some scholars argue that while the Thera eruption may have inspired parts of the story, it cannot fully explain it. But Santorini is not the only possibility. The Mediterranean region sits on complex tectonic boundaries. Earthquakes were common in ancient times, just as they are today. Cities have been destroyed by seismic activity throughout history. There is also the concept of rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age. Around 12,000 years ago, the Earth began warming after a long glacial period. Massive ice sheets covering North America and Northern Europe began to melt. As they melted, sea levels rose dramatically by more than 100 meters over several thousand years. Coastal lands that once supported human settlements would have slowly disappeared beneath the ocean. Imagine living near a shoreline. Over generations, the sea creeps closer. Villages must move. Fields vanish. Sacred places sink below the water. Eventually, the old homeland becomes part of the sea. Could Atlantis represent a cultural memory of those ancient coastal losses? Modern underwater archaeology has discovered submerged structures in different parts of the world. Near Japan, off the coast of Yonaguni, there are underwater formations that some believe may be man-made. In India, structures have been found beneath the Gulf of Combat. Most of these discoveries remain debated among scientists. Still, they remind us of one important fact. Much of human history took place near water, and water does not preserve cities kindly. In the Atlantic Ocean itself, geologists have mapped underwater mountain ranges like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. These are formed by tectonic activity, not sunken continents. Modern plate tectonics does not support the sudden sinking of a massive continent in historical time. Continents move slowly over millions of years. They do not simply drop into the ocean overnight. This creates a major problem for the idea of a giant, lost continent called Atlantis. But what if Atlantis was not a continent, What if it was a large island or coastal civilization destroyed by a combination of earthquake, tsunami, and flood? There are also other proposed locations. Some researchers suggest southern Spain, near the marshlands of Dinyana National Park. Satellite images have revealed circular formations buried under sediment. Others point to the Azores Islands in the Atlantic. Some even look toward Antarctica, though geological evidence does not support a recent advanced civilization there. Each theory has supporters. Each theory has critics. Yet none have produced clear, undeniable proof. When we look at the scientific evidence carefully, we see that natural disasters absolutely have the power to destroy civilizations. Earthquakes, volcanoes, and floods have shaped history again and again, but we have not found physical evidence of a highly advanced, lost island matching Plato's detailed description. Still, the ocean covers more than 70% of the Earth's surface. Much of it remains unexplored. Deep-sea exploration is expensive and technically difficult. There are places in the ocean deeper than Mount Everest is tall. In these dark regions, sunlight never reaches. Pressure is crushing. Temperatures are cold. If ruins existed at great depth, discovering them would be incredibly challenging. And so the mystery continues. In this part of our journey, we have seen that nature itself is capable of creating the kind of destruction described in the Atlantis story. Volcanic eruptions can shatter islands. Earthquakes can swallow cities. Rising seas can erase coastlines. The question is not whether such events can happen. The question is whether one specific event inspired Plato's tale. In the next part, we will explore another idea. What if Atlantis was not destroyed by nature alone, but remembered because it was once technologically advanced? Some believe Atlantis possessed knowledge far beyond other ancient civilizations. Were they truly advanced? Or is that a modern exaggeration? The myth of advanced technology. As the centuries passed, the story of Atlantis began to change. When Plato first described Atlantis, he did not speak of lasers, flying machines, or crystal energy. He described temples, canals, ships, armies, and kings. For his time, Atlantis was impressive, but not supernatural. Yet in the modern world, the image of Atlantis transformed. Some writers and mystics began to describe Atlantis as a civilization far more advanced than any known ancient society. They imagined machines powered by mysterious crystals. They spoke of flying vehicles crossing the seas. They claimed Atlanteans mastered energy forces unknown to modern science. Where did these ideas come from? Much of this transformation began in the 19th century. In 1882, a politician and writer named Ignatius L. Donnelly published a book called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. In it, he argued that Atlantis was a real continent in the Atlantic Ocean. He claimed it was the source of ancient civilizations in Egypt and the Americas. Donnelly believed similarities between pyramids in Egypt and Central America proved a common origin. He suggested that survivors of Atlantis spread knowledge around the world after the island sank. His book became extremely popular. Though professional archaeologists rejected his conclusions, the public imagination embraced them. Later, in the early 20th century, a mystic named Edgar Cayce made even more dramatic claims. Cayce said that in past life readings, he saw Atlantis as a highly advanced society using powerful energy crystals. He predicted parts of Atlantis would rise again near the Bahamas. These claims had no scientific evidence, but they added a new layer to the legend. Atlantis was no longer just a moral warning from ancient Greece. It became a lost super civilization. But we must pause and breathe slowly. When we return to Plato's original texts, we see something different. Plato described a strong naval power, a wealthy island with impressive engineering, circular canals, defensive walls plated with shining metals, organized government, skilled builders. All of this was advanced for the ancient world, but it was not beyond human capability. The Minoans, Egyptians, and Mesopotamians built complex cities thousands of years ago. The pyramids of Egypt still stand. Ancient Rome built aqueducts and roads that lasted centuries. Ancient civilizations were more advanced than many people assume. When modern writers imagine Atlantis with futuristic machines, they often project current technology backward into myth. It is a common human habit. We see something mysterious, and we fill the gaps with imagination. There is also another psychological reason Atlantis became associated with advanced technology. Modern society fears collapse. We know that civilizations can fall. The Roman Empire collapsed. The Maya cities were abandoned. Empires rise and fade. When we imagine Atlantis as highly advanced, yet suddenly destroyed, it mirrors our own anxieties. What if we, too, could disappear? What if beneath our confidence and technology lies fragility? In this way, Atlantis becomes a reflection of ourselves. Some alternative researchers argue that ancient monuments around the world show evidence of lost, advanced knowledge. They point to precise stone cutting in Egypt. They question how massive blocks were transported without modern machinery. However, Mainstream archaeology provides explanations based on engineering, labor organization, and gradual technological development. There is no verified evidence of advanced machines in prehistoric times, no recovered Atlantean devices, no mysterious metal alloys beyond what ancient metallurgy could produce, no underwater ruins showing skyscrapers or futuristic systems. This does not mean ancient people were primitive. On the contrary, they were intelligent, creative, and skilled. They built according to the tools and knowledge available to them. Their achievements were remarkable without needing science fiction additions. It is important to separate fascination from evidence. Stories evolve over time. Each generation reshapes myths according to its fears and dreams. In ancient Greece, Atlantis symbolized moral decline. In the 19th century, it symbolized lost global origins. In the 20th century, it symbolized hidden technology and mystical power. In the 21st century, it often appears in movies and video games as a glowing underwater metropolis. But the core question remains unchanged. Did a real place inspire this legend? To answer that, we must look not only at imagination, but at archaeology. In the next part, we will explore the search for physical evidence. We will examine underwater discoveries, satellite images, and archaeological investigations. Have explorers truly found traces of Atlantis? Or are we chasing shadows beneath the sea? The search beneath the waves. For centuries, the story of Atlantis remained only words on fragile pages. But as human technology advanced, curiosity turned into action. People began to search. The ocean, once mysterious and unreachable, slowly became more accessible. Ships improved. Diving equipment evolved. In the 20th century, sonar mapping and deep-sea submarines allowed researchers to see the ocean floor in ways ancient sailors could never imagine. If Atlantis truly sank beneath the sea, then surely something must remain. Ruins, foundations, walls, roads. But the ocean is not gentle with history. Saltwater corrodes metal. Waves erode stone. Sediment buries structures. Over thousands of years, even the strongest cities can dissolve into silence. One of the most discussed modern discoveries connected to Atlantis lies near the Bahamas. In 1968, divers discovered a formation of large stone blocks underwater near Bimini Island. This formation became known as the Bimini Road. The stones appear arranged in a straight line, almost like a paved pathway. Some believed this was part of a harbor or wall from Atlantis. The discovery created excitement. Supporters of the Atlantis theory saw it as long-awaited proof, but geologists studied the formation carefully. Most concluded that the stones were natural beak rock formations. Beak rock forms when sand and sediment cement together over time. Natural cracking can create rectangular shapes. While the formation looks artificial at first glance, there is no confirmed evidence that humans constructed it. The Bimini Road remains debated in alternative circles, but mainstream science considers it a natural geological feature. Another search has focused on southern Spain, near the wetlands of Doñana National Park. Satellite images have shown circular shapes buried beneath the mud. Some researchers proposed that these might be remains of an ancient city destroyed by a tsunami. This theory connects Atlantis to the ancient civilization of Tartessos, which existed in that region. Tartessos was wealthy and engaged in trade. It mysteriously declined around the 6th century BCE. Could Tartessos have inspired the story? Excavations have revealed ancient settlements in the area, but none match the scale or description given by Plato. No concentric ring capital city has been found. There have also been underwater discoveries in the Mediterranean Sea. Near the coast of Egypt, the ancient city of Heracleion was discovered submerged beneath the water in the early 2000s. For centuries, Heracleion was considered a legend. Then archaeologists found statues, temples, and ships resting on the sea floor. This discovery proved something important. Cities can sink. Earthquakes, soil liquefaction, and rising sea levels can pull entire urban centers beneath the water. What was once myth can sometimes become archaeology. But Heracleion was not Atlantis. It was a known Egyptian port city that sank due to geological instability. Similar underwater ruins have been found near Greece, Japan, and India. Each discovery reminds us that the ocean hides many chapters of human history. Still, none match the dramatic description of Atlantis as a massive empire, larger than known ancient states. Modern ocean mapping has revealed underwater mountain chains, such as the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. These ridges are formed by tectonic plates slowly moving apart. They are not the remains of a sunken continent. The structure of the ocean floor does not support the idea of a large continent collapsing suddenly within human timescales. Plate tectonics moves continents over millions of years, not overnight. This presents a serious challenge to the traditional image of Atlantis as a giant continent swallowed in a single day. Yet hope continues. Deep-sea exploration is still limited. Large portions of the ocean floor remain unmapped in high detail. cost of exploration is enormous. Only certain areas have been studied thoroughly. Some researchers suggest Atlantis, if it existed, may have been smaller than described. Perhaps a regional power rather than a global empire. Over time, stories may have exaggerated its size and influence. Human memory reshapes events. A city becomes a kingdom. A kingdom becomes a continent. There is also the powerful role of imagination. When explorers search for Atlantis, they are not only searching for ruins, they are searching for wonder, for mystery, for proof that history still holds secrets waiting to be uncovered. But science requires evidence. Stone foundations arranged by human hands, artifacts datable to a specific time, clear cultural patterns. So far, no site has provided undeniable proof of Atlantis as described in ancient texts. And yet, the search continues. It continues because history has surprised us before. The ancient city of Troy was once believed to be pure legend from Homer's epic poems. But in the 19th century, excavations revealed layers of ruins in modern-day Turkey that matched aspects of the story. If Troy could emerge from myth into reality, some wonder, could Atlantis do the same? As we drift forward in this journey, we must accept something important. The absence of evidence is not always evidence of absence, but it is also not proof of existence. The ocean keeps its secrets carefully. In the next part, we will explore another dimension of the Atlantis mystery. What if the story survived not because of physical ruins, but because it carried a deeper symbolic meaning shared across cultures? Are there other flood myths in the world that echo the destruction of Atlantis, the memory of the Great Flood? Long before the story of Atlantis was written by Plato, humanity was already telling stories about water. Not gentle rain, not peaceful rivers, but overwhelming floods. Across continents and cultures, ancient civilizations preserved stories of a great deluge that destroyed cities, nations, or even the entire world. These stories appear in places separated by vast oceans and thousands of years. In ancient Mesopotamia, one of the earliest recorded flood stories appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In this epic, a man named Utnapishtim survives a catastrophic flood sent by the gods to wipe out humanity. He builds a massive boat, saves animals, and waits for the waters to recede. In the Hebrew Bible, the story of Noah tells of a similar event. God warns Noah of a coming flood. An ark is built. Animals are saved. The world is washed clean. In ancient Greece, there is the story of Deucalion and Pyrrha. Zeus sends a flood to punish humanity. Deucalion builds a vessel and survives. In India, ancient texts describe Manu, who is warned of a great flood and guided by a divine fish to safety. In Mesoamerican traditions, there are also stories of earlier worlds destroyed by water. These stories share striking similarities. A powerful civilization or humanity becomes corrupt. The gods or natural forces bring destruction through water. A small group survives. The world begins again. Notice the pattern: moral decline, divine or natural punishment, flood, renewal. This pattern closely resembles the Atlantis narrative. It raises an important question. Are these stories independent inventions or distant memories of real natural disasters? At the end of the last ice age, sea levels rose dramatically. Massive glacial lakes burst their boundaries. Coastal regions were flooded. Entire landscapes disappeared beneath rising oceans. For early human communities living near rivers and coasts, these events would have been terrifying. Villages would vanish. Crops would be destroyed. Sacred places lost. Without modern science, such events would be interpreted as divine judgment. Over generations, the memory of local disasters may have transformed into universal flood myths. Some researchers propose that Atlantis could be one regional version of a larger human memory. The memory of catastrophic flooding during prehistoric times. There's also geological evidence of massive regional floods. Around 5600 BCE, the Black Sea may have experienced a sudden influx of Mediterranean water. Some scientists believe rising sea levels broke through natural barriers, rapidly flooding surrounding lands. If true, such an event would have displaced thousands of people. Their descendants may have carried the story of a drowned homeland. Still, we must remain calm and careful. Flood myths are powerful storytelling tools. Water symbolizes cleansing, destruction, and rebirth in many cultures. It is natural for civilizations dependent on rivers to develop stories about floods. This does not automatically prove a single global event. It does, however, show something profound. Humans remember trauma through stories. When something terrible happens, an earthquake, a tsunami, a volcanic eruption, survivors tell their children. Those children tell their own. Details shift. Symbolism grows. Over centuries, memory becomes myth. Atlantis may be part of this process. In Plato's telling, Atlantis is destroyed by earthquakes and floods in a single day and night. The speed of destruction feels dramatic, almost cinematic. But earthquakes followed by tsunamis can indeed erase coastal cities quickly. In 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami devastated entire communities in hours. In 2011, the tsunami in Japan destroyed towns along the coast within minutes. Modern technology allows us to understand these events scientifically. Ancient people did not have this explanation. They had stories that gave meaning to chaos. There is another layer to consider. Flood myths often emphasize morality. Societies become corrupt. The gods punish them. Only the righteous survive. This moral structure mirrors Plato's description of Atlantis. As Atlanteans grew greedy and aggressive, disaster followed. It suggests that Atlantis may not simply be about geography. It may be about human nature. When we place Atlantis alongside global flood myths, we begin to see a pattern of shared human experience. Fear of water, fear of collapse, fear of moral decay. The ocean becomes both creator and destroyer. It feeds civilizations through trade and fishing. It also swallows them without warning. As we drift gently through this part of the mystery, we see that Atlantis does not stand alone. It belongs to a family of ancient stories that attempt to explain why powerful societies fall. But the question remains, if flood myths are common across cultures, why does Atlantis feel different? Perhaps because Plato gave it detail, structure, political organization, architecture, military power. He did not describe a simple village lost in a flood. He described an empire. In the next part, we will explore the political meaning of Atlantis more deeply. We will examine how Plato used Atlantis to compare two societies, one corrupt, one disciplined. Was Atlantis less about the ocean and more about the dangers of imperial ambition, power, pride, and the fall of empires? To understand the deeper meaning of Atlantis, we must return once more to the world of Plato. Atlantis was not described as a weak or primitive society. It was powerful, wealthy, organized, militarily strong. It ruled over other islands and parts of distant continents. It possessed a mighty navy and sought expansion beyond its borders. This detail is important because in Plato's time, Athens itself had once been an imperial power. During the 5th century BCE, Athens led the Delian League, a powerful naval alliance originally formed to defend against Persian invasion. Over time, Athens began to dominate its allies. Tribute payments were demanded. Military pressure increased. What began as cooperation slowly became control. This period is known as the Athenian Empire, but power created tension. Eventually, conflict erupted between Athens and Sparta in the long and devastating Peloponnesian War. After years of fighting, Athens was defeated. Its empire collapsed. Its pride was wounded. Plato grew up in the shadow of this defeat. He witnessed political instability, shifting governments, and moral confusion. His teacher, Socrates, was executed by the Athenian state, a decision Plato deeply opposed. These experiences shaped his philosophy. He believed democracy without wisdom could become dangerous. He feared that ambition and greed could corrupt even the greatest city. Now consider Atlantis again. In Plato's story, Atlantis begins noble and disciplined. Its rulers are guided by divine principles. But over generations, the divine nature fades. Human weakness grows stronger. The Atlanteans begin to crave domination. They attempt to conquer lands beyond their island. They become imperial. They seek control. They overreach. And then destruction follows. This pattern mirrors a warning. When power becomes driven by pride rather than virtue, collapse is inevitable. Plato contrasts Atlantis with an idealized version of ancient Athens. In his story, Athens stands brave and disciplined against Atlantean aggression. It represents courage and moral strength. This is not accidental. Atlantis may have symbolized imperial arrogance. Athens, in its ideal form, symbolized disciplined virtue. In this interpretation, Atlantis is not simply a lost island. It is a political lesson. Plato may have been asking his readers to reflect. What makes a society strong? Is it wealth? Is it military power? Is it advanced engineering? Or is it justice, moderation, and wisdom? Throughout history, empires have risen and fallen in cycles. The Assyrian Empire once dominated the Near East. It fell. The Persian Empire expanded across vast territories. It was defeated. The Roman Empire ruled the Mediterranean world for centuries. It eventually fractured and declined. In each case, expansion brought strength, but also strain. Managing vast territories required resources. Internal corruption grew. External enemies pressed at the borders. Atlantis fits this pattern of overextension. Plato's description of its destruction in a single day and night may symbolize sudden collapse after gradual decay. From the outside, an empire appears strong. From within, its foundations may already be weakening. This idea remains powerful today. Modern societies still debate the balance between power and morality. Economic growth, military strength, and technological advancement are often celebrated. But history shows that internal division, corruption, and loss of shared values can destabilize even the strongest nations. Atlantis feels timeless because it reflects this universal truth. There is another subtle detail in Plato's account. The Atlanteans were originally descendants of Poseidon, the god of the sea. They had divine ancestry, but over time, their divine portion diminished as human traits became dominant. Symbolically, this suggests that virtue requires effort to maintain. Without discipline, higher ideals fade. When societies forget their guiding principles, they drift toward excess, and excess invites disaster. Whether Atlantis existed physically or not, its message about power remains clear. Strength without wisdom is dangerous. Wealth without restraint leads to imbalance. Ambition without morality invites ruin. In this way, Atlantis becomes more than a lost city. It becomes a mirror reflecting the fate of civilizations across time. As we move forward, we must ask another question. If Atlantis was a political and moral allegory, why did it capture the imagination of explorers, mystics, and scientists for centuries? Why did people insist on searching for it in the real world? In the next part, we will explore how Atlantis moved from ancient philosophy into Renaissance maps, an age of exploration speculation. How did a Greek dialogue become a global obsession? From ancient text to Renaissance maps. For many centuries after Plato wrote about Atlantis, the story remained mostly a philosophical curiosity. Ancient scholars discussed it, debated it, and often treated it as allegory rather than literal history. But then the world changed. During the Renaissance, Europe rediscovered classical texts with new excitement. Ancient Greek and Roman works were translated, copied, and studied widely. Plato's dialogues were read again with fresh eyes. At the same time, explorers were sailing farther than ever before. In 1492, Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic Ocean, reaching lands previously unknown to Europeans. Soon after, explorers like Ferdinand Magellan and others mapped new continents and oceans. Suddenly, the Atlantic Ocean was no longer an empty mystery. It was a gateway, and if there were new lands across the Atlantic, could there once have been lost lands as well? The timing was powerful. Plato had written that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, beyond the Strait of Gibraltar, in the Atlantic Ocean. Renaissance readers now knew that vast territories existed there. The imagination awakened. Mapmakers began including speculative islands and continents in their charts. Some early maps even showed large landmasses in the Atlantic, inspired partly by misinterpretations of geography and partly by myth. as knowledge expanded, so did speculation. In the 16th and 17th centuries, thinkers began linking Atlantis with newly discovered parts of the Americas. Some proposed that the indigenous civilizations of the Americas were descendants of Atlantean survivors. Others suggested Atlantis had once connected Europe and America as a bridge between continents. These ideas were not based on solid archaeological evidence. They were attempts to explain similarities in architecture, myth, or symbols between distant cultures. For example, when Europeans saw pyramids in Mexico, they compared them to Egyptian pyramids. Without understanding independent cultural development, some assumed a shared origin. Atlantis became a convenient explanation. It served as a lost mother civilization from which knowledge supposedly spread worldwide. This idea gained even more momentum in the 19th century with writers like Ignatius L. Donnelly, who argued that Atlantis was the source of global civilization. He believed survivors carried advanced knowledge to Egypt, Central America, and beyond. But professional archaeology was also advancing during this period. Excavations in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica began to reveal detailed timelines of cultural development. These timelines showed gradual evolution of technology and architecture, not sudden influence from a vanished super-civilization. Still, the public imagination preferred mystery. Atlantis offered romance, adventure, lost treasure beneath the sea. It also fit perfectly into the spirit of exploration. The age of discovery was filled with legends of El Dorado, the fountain of youth, and unknown continents. Atlantis joined this family of myths. There is something important happening here. The meaning of Atlantis shifted again. For Plato, it was a moral and political lesson. For Renaissance thinkers, it became a geographical puzzle. For 19th century writers, it became a lost global civilization. Each era reshaped Atlantis according to its own worldview. During the Renaissance, humans began to believe they could uncover every secret of the earth. Maps filled blank spaces. Coastlines were measured. The world felt increasingly knowable. But Atlantis represented something still hidden, a reminder that even as knowledge expanded, mystery remained. Interestingly, as mapping technology improved, the likelihood of a massive lost continent in the Atlantic decreased. By the 18th and 19th centuries, scientific understanding of geology and oceanography grew stronger. The idea of a continent sinking suddenly became harder to defend scientifically. Yet belief did not disappear. Instead, Atlantis moved from maps to imagination. It became less about physical geography and more about hidden knowledge. In literature, Atlantis inspired novels and adventure stories. In the 20th century, it appeared in films and comic books. It evolved into a shining underwater kingdom, glowing with advanced technology. But beneath all these transformations lies the original question: did something real inspire Plato's tale? Or has Atlantis survived precisely because it lives at the intersection of history and imagination? As we move deeper into this journey, we will explore the scientific challenges more directly. In the next part, we will examine what modern geology says about sunken continents and ocean floors. We will look at plate tectonics and ask whether Atlantis, as described, is physically possible. Can entire landmasses vanish in a single day? The science of a lost continent. To understand whether Atlantis could have existed as Plato described, we must look at the Earth itself. Not legends, not stories, but the very structure of the planet. Modern geology provides important insights. The Earth's crust is not a single solid shell. It is made up of tectonic plates, massive slabs of rock that float atop the semi-fluid mantle below. These plates move slowly, usually only a few centimeters per year. Mountains rise, oceans form, continents drift, but the movement is gradual, measured over millions of years. Plate tectonics explains many features of the planet: the mid-Atlantic ridge, the Himalayas, and the ring of fire in the Pacific Ocean. Volcanoes, earthquakes, and tsunamis are products of these forces. But even the most violent events do not suddenly swallow entire continents. They reshape the Earth slowly, or in extreme localized cases, devastate regions, islands, or coastal areas. Plato's Atlantis, according to his account, was larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, and it sank into the sea in a single day and night of catastrophic earthquakes and floods. From a geological perspective, this is highly unlikely. The sudden disappearance of a landmass of such scale would require forces beyond anything Earth has produced in recorded history. The laws of physics and plate tectonics do not support it. That does not mean all destruction is impossible. We know that smaller islands have vanished in the ocean. Krakatoa, a volcanic island in Indonesia, erupted violently in 1883. Much of the island collapsed into the sea, triggering massive tsunamis. Entire communities were destroyed. Similarly, in the Caribbean and Pacific, volcanic islands have been partially submerged or reshaped by eruptions. Could Atlantis have been a smaller island or a coastal city rather than a continent? Perhaps. Geological and archaeological evidence suggests that rising seas at the end of the last ice age submerged many coastal settlements worldwide. Humans who lived near shorelines would have been displaced, and the memory of their drowned homelands could have persisted in myth. Another important factor is sedimentation. Over thousands of years, sediments carried by rivers and tides can bury ruins deeply. Underwater currents and shifting sand can hide structures entirely. Even advanced sonar cannot detect all formations on the sea floor. The deep ocean remains largely unexplored. Much of it is a world humans have only begun to map. Yet, when scientists examine the Atlantic Ocean specifically, the location Plato indicated, they find no evidence of a massive sunken continent. Satellite mapping and deep-sea surveys show underwater mountain ranges, plate boundaries, and volcanic formations, but nothing resembling a lost empire of the scale described. This explains why the Atlantis mystery persists. Physical evidence is elusive. The ocean is vast, and we have explored only a fraction. The possibilities are tantalizing, but proof is absent. So why do people continue to search? Because Atlantis exists on multiple levels. It is at once a moral allegory about pride, corruption, and the fall of civilizations, a potential memory of real ancient disasters such as earthquakes, tsunamis, or rising seas, a source of imagination for explorers, writers, and mystics. Science challenges the literal interpretation, but it does not erase the legend. Even today, deep-sea archaeologists continue to investigate submerged sites. They explore coastlines of ancient civilizations. They study underwater structures like the Bimini Road or formations near Japan. Each discovery is carefully analyzed to distinguish natural formations from human construction. These studies remind us of two important truths. One, the Earth is dynamic. Land can vanish or emerge. Cities can sink. Civilizations can be lost to time. Two, humans have always sought meaning in these changes. They create stories, myths, and allegories to explain disasters beyond their control. Atlantis, in this sense, is both real and unreal. It is a story anchored in philosophy, myth, and human memory. And yet, it may also contain echoes of geological events that reshaped human history. As we continue, we will explore how Atlantis influenced modern culture. We will see how it inspired explorers, inventors, and storytellers. How it moved from Plato's philosophical dialogues into novels, movies, and even video games. The mystery of Atlantis lives not just in the sea, but in the human imagination. Atlantis in modern culture, even though the existence of Atlantis has never been confirmed by science, the legend continues to capture human imagination. From the Renaissance to the modern world, Atlantis has inspired explorers, writers, artists, and filmmakers. During the 19th century, the popularity of Atlantis surged. Writers like Ignatius L. Donnelly presented it as a real lost continent. His ideas, though not scientifically proven, spread widely. Many people began to believe that Atlantis was the cradle of civilization. Some even attempted expeditions to locate it, often focusing on the Azores or the Caribbean. In literature, Atlantis became a symbol of lost knowledge and advanced civilizations. Science fiction writers imagined futuristic cities with flying machines and crystal energy, blending Plato's philosophical narrative with modern fantasy. Jules Verne and later H.P. Lovecraft drew inspiration from the legend to craft mysterious, otherworldly tales. In film and television, Atlantis often appears as a shining underwater kingdom, full of advanced technology and mystical powers. Movies portray it as a lost utopia, waiting to be discovered, reminding viewers of humanity's enduring fascination with hidden worlds. The Disney animated film Atlantis, The Lost Empire, popularized the idea of a technologically advanced society beneath the ocean, merging adventure and mythology. Even video games and comic books feature Atlantis. It is often depicted as a powerful, hidden civilization, rich with resources and secrets. The legend has become a part of global pop culture, influencing storytelling across multiple media. Yet, despite all this modern reinterpretation, the core of the Atlantis story remains: the rise and fall of a powerful society. Plato's original lesson about morality, ambition, and the consequences of hubris continues to resonate. Atlantis serves as a cautionary tale about the fragility of civilizations. This modern fascination also shows how myths evolve. Over time, Plato's philosophical allegory transformed into a legend of treasure, technology, and adventure. Each era reshapes Atlantis according to its cultural values and imagination. Even today, the legend sparks exploration. Deep-sea archaeologists, oceanographers, and amateur explorers continue to search for clues. Atlantis remains a symbol of humanity's desire to uncover the unknown, a bridge between myth and history, imagination and reality. In the next part, we will examine alternative theories of Atlantis. Could it be linked to real ancient civilizations? Did survivors carry knowledge across the globe? Or is it purely symbolic? Alternative theories of Atlantis. As the story of Atlantis spread through history, many researchers, historians, and enthusiasts proposed alternative explanations for its origin. Could Atlantis have a historical basis? Or is it purely a philosophical tale? One of the earliest alternative theories links Atlantis to the Minoan civilization on Crete and Santorini, ancient Thera. Around 1600 BCE, the Thera volcano erupted violently, devastating nearby islands and coastal settlements. The Minoans were skilled sailors, builders, and traders, much like Plato's description of Atlanteans. Entire cities were buried in ash, and tsunamis likely struck Crete and surrounding areas. Some scholars suggest that the Thera eruption inspired the memory of a powerful civilization suddenly destroyed by natural forces. Another theory points to Tartessos, a mysterious civilization in southern Spain. Tartessos was wealthy, skilled in trade, and eventually disappeared around the 6th century BCE. Satellite imagery and ancient writings hint at the possibility of lost settlements near the Dinyana wetlands. Proponents of this theory argue that Atlantis may represent a memory of Tartessos' decline rather than a distant island in the Atlantic. Some researchers have looked further afield. The Azores, a group of islands in the mid-Atlantic, have been suggested as remnants of Atlantis. Their location beyond the Strait of Gibraltar aligns with Plato's description. Geological studies, however, show that these islands are volcanic and not remnants of a sunken continent. Others have even proposed connections to the Caribbean, the Bahamas, or parts of the Americas. These theories often rely on similarities in architecture, myth, or symbols between distant cultures. For example, pyramids exist in Egypt and Central America, though scholars generally attribute them to independent development rather than a shared Atlantean source. A more symbolic approach sees Atlantis not as a physical place, but as a memory myth. Rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, submerged many coastal settlements. Such events could have inspired stories of lost lands. Combined with Plato's philosophical narrative, these memories may have evolved into the Atlantis legend. Skeptics argue that Atlantis is entirely fictional. The story appears only in Plato's dialogues, and no other ancient source confirms it. Numbers and descriptions, such as the claim that Atlantis existed 9,000 years before Solon, seem exaggerated. The physical scale of Atlantis, as described, is incompatible with known geology and plate tectonics. Yet the fascination continues. Every alternative theory highlights human curiosity. People want to find Atlantis because it promises a link to ancient knowledge, advanced civilizations, or lost wisdom. It becomes a symbol of exploration, discovery, and the possibility that history holds secrets still hidden beneath the waves. In the next part, we will examine Atlantis as a moral and philosophical symbol. Beyond geography, what lessons does the story teach about human nature, ambition, and the consequences of who Atlantis as a moral and philosophical symbol? While explorers search the seas and archaeologists study submerged ruins, the original lesson of Atlantis lies in its deeper meaning. Plato did not merely describe geography or architecture. He created a story to explore human nature, morality, and the rise and fall of civilizations. In Plato's dialogues, Atlantis begins as a noble society. Its rulers are descendants of Poseidon, the god of the sea, and they govern with virtue, wisdom, and fairness. The society thrives. Architecture, engineering, and culture flourish. But over generations, the Atlanteans grow proud. Their ambition expands beyond their island. They seek conquest, wealth, and domination. This transformation mirrors a philosophical concept Plato emphasized throughout his works. Moral decay leads to collapse. When power is divorced from virtue, even the most advanced civilization is vulnerable. Atlantis becomes a metaphor for hubris, the dangerous pride of a society that believes it is invincible. By contrasting Atlantis with idealized Athens, Plato reinforces his moral lesson. While Atlantis succumbs to corruption, Athens represents discipline, courage, and justice. The story suggests that societies rise and fall not solely because of external forces, but because of internal character. Atlantis also serves as a warning about technological and military advancement. The Atlanteans possessed impressive engineering, powerful armies, and a vast navy. Yet these achievements could not save them from their moral failings. Progress alone, without ethical guidance, is insufficient. Philosophically, the story explores the duality of human nature. The divine blood of Atlantis symbolizes potential for wisdom and virtue. As it fades, human weakness dominates greed, ambition, and excess. The eventual destruction of Atlantis is both literal and symbolic, illustrating how neglecting ethical principles invites disaster. The narrative is also a meditation on memory and history. Plato frames the story as coming from Egyptian priests, ancient sources predating Athens. By placing Atlantis thousands of years in the past, he emphasizes that moral lessons endure, even as specific events are lost to time. Atlantis becomes timeless, a mirror reflecting the strengths and vulnerabilities of all civilizations. Throughout history, this symbolic interpretation remains powerful. Modern societies continue to rise and fall, often echoing the patterns Plato described. Economic inequality, political corruption, and overreach can destabilize even technologically advanced nations. Atlantis reminds us that human ambition requires balance with wisdom and restraint. Moreover, Atlantis has inspired philosophical reflection beyond politics. Writers, thinkers, and storytellers have used it to examine the relationship between humans and nature, the consequences of ignoring ecological limits, and the fragility of societies in the face of environmental disasters. In this sense, Atlantis is as relevant today as it was in Plato's time. In the next part, we will explore the psychological allure of Atlantis. Why does a story of a lost city continue to captivate humans across cultures, generations, and continents? What drives our fascination with vanished civilizations? The psychological allure of Atlantis. The legend of Atlantis captivates the human imagination for reasons that go beyond archaeology, geology, or philosophy. Its enduring appeal lies deeply in psychology, our fascination with mystery, loss, and the unknown. At its core, Atlantis embodies the ultimate what-if scenario. What if a civilization far more advanced than our own once existed? What if it was suddenly destroyed, leaving only whispers of its glory? Humans are naturally drawn to unanswered questions. We are storytellers and pattern seekers. A story of a lost city, hidden beneath the waves, triggers curiosity, wonder, and speculation. There's also an element of escapism. Atlantis represents a world removed from everyday reality, a place of wealth, beauty, and advanced knowledge. For writers, artists, and audiences, it is an imaginative playground. The city's temples, canals, and sophisticated society allow us to explore ideas of utopia, perfection, and civilization without limits. Fear and caution are intertwined with fascination. Atlantis is not just a story of marvels. It is a tale of hubris and catastrophe. It reminds us of our vulnerability. Even the mightiest societies can collapse if moral principles are ignored or natural forces are underestimated. Psychologically, this duality, wonder mixed with warning, makes the story emotionally powerful. Memory also plays a role. Humans have always used stories to preserve collective experiences. Flood myths, sunken cities, and lost empires are common worldwide. Atlantis resonates with these archetypal memories. It connects us to a shared human consciousness that remembers disaster, resilience, and the fragility of civilization. Another aspect is hope and discovery. Atlantis suggests that hidden knowledge or treasures await those willing to seek them. This taps into the explorer's instinct and the universal human desire for revelation. Whether through deep-sea exploration, archaeology, or imagination, people are drawn to the possibility that that secrets of the past may still be uncovered. Cultural and symbolic resonance reinforces the appeal. Atlantis has been interpreted as everything from a moral allegory to a source of advanced ancient technology. It can represent lost wisdom, the consequences of greed, or even a metaphor for ecological collapse. Its flexibility allows each generation to reshape the story according to contemporary values, fears, and aspirations. Finally, the mystery itself fuels fascination. There is no definitive evidence of Atlantis, nor is there absolute proof that it never existed. Humans are naturally compelled to pursue mysteries that cannot be fully solved. This unresolved tension, the space between possibility and impossibility, keeps the legend alive. In sum, Atlantis captures the imagination because it combines wonder, warning, memory, and mystery. It satisfies our need for storytelling, moral reflection, and exploration. It connects past and present, reality and imagination, hope and caution. In the next part, we will examine Atlantis' role in literature, art, and film, exploring how this psychological allure shaped centuries of cultural expression. Atlantis in literature, art, and film. The story of Atlantis has inspired centuries of creative expression. Beyond philosophy and archaeology, it has become a cultural symbol, shaping literature, visual art, and cinema across the globe. In literature, Atlantis first captured attention during the Renaissance, when classical texts were rediscovered. Writers began using the legend as a backdrop for moral, political, or adventurous tales. In the 19th century, authors like Ignatius L. Donnelly popularized the idea of Atlantis as a real lost civilization, blending adventure with speculation about ancient technology and global influence. Fiction writers and novelists soon expanded the story. Jules Verne incorporated mysterious lost lands into his adventure novels, while H.P. Lovecraft used the concept of ancient, sunken civilizations to evoke cosmic horror. Atlantis became a canvas on which authors could explore humanity's fears and desires, blending history, myth, and imagination. Visual art also embraced the legend. Painters of the 19th and 20th centuries depicted majestic underwater cities, domed temples, and crystal towers. Artists imagined Atlantean landscapes in vivid colors, merging natural beauty with architectural grandeur. These images reinforced the notion of Atlantis as a lost utopia, full of wonder and sophistication. In film, Atlantis took on new life. Movies and animated features often portray it as an advanced, technologically sophisticated society, sometimes submerged beneath the sea, glowing with mysterious energy. Disney's Atlantis, The Lost Empire 2001 introduced a generation to this vision, combining adventure, exploration, and a lost civilization narrative. Atlantis in film frequently blends ancient wisdom with futuristic technology, turning Plato's moral allegory into an action-adventure story. Television and video games further expand the myth. From documentary-style explorations of lost civilizations to fantastical narratives in gaming worlds, Atlantis continues to inspire curiosity, creativity, and engagement. It serves as a metaphor for discovery, ambition, and the unknown, while simultaneously cautioning against hubris and unchecked power. This cultural evolution shows the flexibility of the Atlantis legend. While Plato's original text focused on morality, the narrative has adapted to fit the hopes, fears, and imaginative needs of each era. It can represent utopia, catastrophe, lost knowledge, or human folly, depending on the storyteller. Importantly, Atlantis' artistic legacy also reflects humanity's enduring relationship with the ocean. Oceans have long represented mystery, depth, and danger. By situating Atlantis beneath the waves, artists and storytellers emphasize the unknown and the power of nature. The story becomes both a celebration of human creativity and a reminder of our limitations. Through literature, art, and film, Atlantis remains alive in public imagination. It is not confined to ancient texts or academic debates. Its enduring presence across media demonstrates the universal appeal of a story that combines wonder, morality, and the mystery of what lies beneath. In the next part, we will explore Atlantis' role in modern pseudoscience, mysticism, and alternative archaeology. How have these interpretations shaped contemporary fascination with the lost city, Atlantis in pseudoscience and mysticism? While Plato's Atlantis began as a philosophical story, over the centuries, it has been embraced by pseudoscience, mysticism, and speculative archaeology. These interpretations often mix imagination, personal belief, and selective evidence, creating compelling but unverified narratives. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, writers like Ignatius L. Donnelly suggested Atlantis was the source of all ancient civilizations. He claimed that survivors spread knowledge to Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Americas. While influential, these ideas lacked rigorous evidence and were largely rejected by mainstream archaeology. Later, mystics and psychics added another layer. Edgar Cayce, often called the Sleeping Prophet, claimed that Atlantis possessed advanced technology powered by crystals. Cayce predicted that parts of Atlantis would rise again near the Bahamas, inspiring decades of speculation and treasure hunts. His visions influenced New Age beliefs and spiritual movements, connecting Atlantis to concepts of energy, consciousness, and ancient wisdom. Alternative archaeologists have also contributed to modern fascination. Some have suggested Atlantis corresponds to real locations, from the Azores to the Caribbean, or even Antarctica. These theories often rely on selective readings of ancient texts, maps, or geological anomalies. They frequently ignore scientific consensus regarding plate tectonics and the impossibility of a continent sinking in a single day. Why does this pseudo-historical interpretation endure? Partly because humans are drawn to mystery and wonder. Atlantis promises hidden knowledge, advanced technology, and lost wisdom. It satisfies a psychological desire to believe in extraordinary possibilities beyond the ordinary world. It also reflects a longing for a golden age. Atlantis is often imagined as a utopia, a civilization where humans lived in harmony with technology, nature, or spiritual principles. This idealized vision appeals to modern audiences frustrated with contemporary social, environmental, or political challenges. In a sense, Atlantis becomes a mirror of our hopes and anxieties. Yet, critical thinking and scientific methodology are essential. Archaeology, geology, and historical research provide no confirmed evidence of a technologically advanced, continent-sized Atlantis. Underwater structures like the Bimini Road are explained as natural formations. Plate tectonics rules out sudden continental disappearance. Many mystical claims cannot be tested or verified. Still, the allure of Atlantis in pseudoscience and mysticism demonstrates how myths evolve. Stories adapt to cultural desires and fears, blending history, speculation, and imagination. Atlantis serves multiple functions: a cautionary tale, a source of inspiration, and a playground for exploring ideas beyond the limits of conventional knowledge. The enduring legacy of Atlantis. After exploring the story of Atlantis across philosophy, history, mythology, science, and culture, we arrive at the final reflection. Why does this legend endure, and what can it teach us? Plato's account of Atlantis was never intended solely as a geographical record. It was a philosophical narrative, a moral allegory about the rise and fall of civilizations, and a cautionary tale about pride, corruption, and the consequences of overreaching ambition. Atlantis begins as a model society, rich in virtue and guided by wisdom, yet succumbs to greed and hubris, leading to sudden destruction. Over the centuries, Atlantis transformed. Renaissance thinkers mapped it as a real land. Explorers searched the oceans. Writers and artists imagined it as a utopia beneath the sea. Mystics like Edgar Cayce attributed advanced technologies and spiritual knowledge to its people. Alternative archaeologists speculated on lost continents. Each generation reshaped the legend according to its cultural values, fears, and hopes. Yet underlying all these transformations is a universal theme: human fascination with mystery. Atlantis embodies curiosity, imagination, and the desire to understand the unknown. It represents both the heights of human achievement and the fragility of civilizations. In every interpretation, we see ourselves reflected, our ambitions, our fears, and our hopes for discovery. Scientific study reminds us to distinguish fact from fiction. There is no verified evidence of a continent-sized Atlantis or advanced technologies ascribed to its people. Geological principles, archaeology, and historical research show that sudden continental disappearance is impossible. Yet these facts do not diminish the power of the story. They only highlight how myth and reality intertwine. The legend of Atlantis also connects to broader human experiences. Across cultures, stories of floods, lost lands, and vanished civilizations echo the themes of Plato's tale. Atlantis is part of a shared human memory, reminding us that the rise and fall of societies is both inevitable and instructive. It teaches lessons about morality, governance, environmental respect, and the consequences of hubris. In modern culture, Atlantis continues to inspire. Literature, films, art, games, and speculative theories ensure that the story remains alive. It challenges us to imagine, explore, and question. The legend encourages intellectual curiosity, moral reflection, and creative expression. Ultimately, Atlantis endures because it exists on multiple levels as a moral allegory, warning against pride and corruption, as a historical reflection, echoing memories of real disasters and lost civilizations, as a symbol of human imagination, adventure, and the desire to uncover hidden knowledge, as a cultural icon, inspiring art, literature, and media for generations. Whether real, symbolic, or a mixture of both, Atlantis teaches us that stories shape our understanding of the world. It reminds us that even in the absence of physical evidence, ideas can transcend time. Legends survive because they speak to something deeply human: our fascination with wonder, the unknown, and the lessons history offers. And so, the sleeping mystery of Atlantis remains alive, not beneath the waves, but in our minds, in our stories, and in our quest to understand the past and ourselves. The journey ends here, but the mystery continues. Atlantis is not only a lost city, it is a timeless mirror reflecting humanity's imagination, wisdom, and caution. This concludes your 16-part exploration of Atlantis, Sajib. If you want, I can also create a *** complete ready to upload YouTube series, Setup **, for all 16 parts, including descriptions, tags, hashtags, and thumbnail ideas to maximize engagement.